democracy, it's a part of the solution or a part of the problem in the Arab region?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Okay, so uh, the, we don't know who invented democracy, just to be clear. The first state that we have a recorded decision to become a democracy is were the city states in Greece. I don't buy that Greece is in a different region than Turkey and Syria and Egypt. This idea that Greece is in Europe and that somehow the Middle East isn't related to it is nonsensical to me. Greece belongs to the Middle East. The Middle East is a dumb name for a region, but I don't want to get into that. Greece belongs to it. So it is in my mind, a Middle Eastern concept. If you look at Arab culture historically, one of the reasons why the Arab world has been hard to rule is because Arabs are, by their very nature, culturally, very independent, very strong-willed, very opinionated. In other words, they have inherently kind of a democratic bent in culturally. And one of the interesting things about the UAE, which I'm very fascinated by, is that even though it's an absolute monarchy, it's not a democracy in any way, shape, or form. It has a democratic tendency in that its rulers pay very close attention to what the people are thinking and feeling. And so there's actually direct input from the public into the monarchy's decisions, which I find a fascinating, it's like a hybridization. It's not the kind of tyrannical monarchy that we tend to think of when we think of monarchs. It's actually kind of almost, the term would be silly to use, but it has this public opinion component to it, which is really powerful. And I think it's a fantastic idea. And in part because it not only makes your public happy, it'll make them more productive, right? There's a feedback loop that's on the right side of the equation. The problem in the world isn't whether we're a democracy, a republic, or a monarchy. That's not the issue, and I think people get stuck on this. The problem is, how do you create good leadership? So in a monarchy, one person makes the decision. In a republic, a handful of people make the decisions. The United States is a republic. Now, it's an electoral republic. The people elect the people who make the decision for them. In a democracy, there's no government. The people make the decision directly. So in the most famous democracy ever was the Athenian democracy. It lasted like 80 years before it was destroyed. But the people voted directly on the policies. So the people voted on whether or not to fix the roads, whether or not to raise their taxes, whether or not to go to war. Once they were at war, where to send the soldiers, what generals to assign to what units. Those were all made by the public, by the voters. So there's no democracies on the planet right now. The only thing that we have on the planet are republics and we have monarchies. That's it. If you were to create a democracy, you would have to have an extremely educated public because that's your leadership. If you're a republic, you have to figure out a mechanism to try to get really well-educated, really thoughtful, really good leaders into positions of power. And then if you're a monarchy, you just pray, right? You pray that you end up with good leadership. If you're lucky, there's a culture of good leadership that transfers from generation to generation. That's what I'm seeing in the UAE. The UAE is, on its second generation of leadership, about to enter its third in the next few years. And from all indications, it looks like it's going to be 3 generations of fantastic leadership, which, when you think about it, if you're a hereditary monarchy, is not guaranteed, right? You could very easily end up with the next generation not being particularly well off. In the Arab world, the problem is, and it's the problem in the United States too, that the public doesn't have the kind of institutional knowledge and doesn't have the kind of institutional development and the kind of education necessary to create stable voting. So there have only been a few Arab states that have actually had free and fair elections. In Egypt, the results weren't positive. It was a little bit of a disaster, in fact. And so Egypt's experiment ended up being a very brief and failed event. I think one of the lessons learned is that the institution, the way that the election was done, was set up incorrectly. And so, constitution design obviously matters. But what's more important than that is what's the state of mind of the people and the voters. And so, like, if you're Egypt or you're the United States, you have to really wonder if elections are exactly what you want anymore. Because in the United States, we keep getting awful outcome after awful outcome. Tunisia ultimately, right, it was the only real electoral republic that had free and fair elections, has basically voted to not do that anymore. And so the little d democracy, like the term that we incorrectly use on a regular basis, when we talk about Germany as a democracy or Japan's a democracy, in those terms, the Arab world has had a very, very thin, very short, very localized experiment with it. So it's too early to tell. My hope is that as time goes forward, the trend line for the Arab world won't go with the direction the rest of the planet is going in. One of the things that's dangerous about the technology that we have right now. So take, for example, GPS. Nobody knows the map of their cities anymore because you get in your car and you put the address into your phone and you go to that location and you put no thought into learning your city. And so the result is, and I'm one of those people. I'm not blaming others. I used to memorize, the city map, and I knew how to get from point A to point B. I didn't have to think about it. And these days, even something that I regularly drive to, I tend to enter it into the map almost automatically, like even without thinking about it. One reason, obviously, is you'll see traffic, and then you go, "Oh, I need to go a different way." But it's made us dependent on it. So what we've effectively done is we've exported that part of our brain to our device. And my fear is with AI, we'll export even more of our brain capacity to AI. So, if AI can do things like register my car and renew my insurance, and it can take care of those dumb, boring, mundane things, pay the bills, organize my photos on my computer, I would love that. I think those would be amazing uses for AI. What I'm worried about is that AI will become so dependent on it, we'll become an even dumber species than we already are. And instead of us being liberated by AI, we will tunnel deeper and deeper into conspiracy theories, into irrational belief systems like that the earth is flat. And the possibility of having a functioning democracy going forward will become even less possible. We're seeing this even in places that we think of as stable, like Sweden's. The election results they had in their last election wasn't exactly a desirable outcome. The fascists did very well in Sweden, and so you're like, oh, this is a sign that the Swedish system is in trouble. It may not be failing, but it's definitely there's definitely warning signs something is wrong. And unfortunately, I think that's the trend the whole planet is on. So for me, the conversation about whether or not we should have an electoral republic or what kind of government we should have is a global problem. It's not confined to the Arab world.